Wait, did Chanel just admit that their bags are too expensive?
Is this the end of Chanel price hikes? The brand just announced that they're pressing pause on price hikes this year.
Chanel said, we're not going to increase our prices because you know what? Our sales are actually down 4%.
I'm certainly not buying Chanel bags right now.
Chanel, a luxury brand known for its eye-watering price hikes. In today's video, we're breaking down what's really going on with Chanel's pricing in 2025 and what it means for luxury lovers like us and why it could be a turning point in the industry. Chanel is notorious for its regular price hikes. From 2019 to 2022, we saw increases as high as 20% in 1 year. And this wasn't just inflation. Chanel was reshaping its pricing to compete with Hermes and Louis Vuitton on brand positioning. As a result, classic flat bags that once cost $5,000 are now pushing $10,000 depending on the country.
The price of a small classic Chanel flap is now almost exactly the same as the retail price of a Birkin 25.
However, this history of over-the-top price hikes seems to have peaked, and in 2024, Chanel experienced a sales and profit downturn, with revenues and operating profits falling by 4.3% and 30% respectively. This was a significant drop for the luxury brand, which had previously weathered the initial impact of the luxury slowdown. Whilst some analysts attribute this to a global luxury market slowdown, Chanel CEO Lena Nair suggests that they have chosen to invest more even during challenging economic conditions. In 2024, for the first time in years, Chanel's price increase averaged just 3%. That's pretty much in line with global inflation and a huge contrast to double-digit surges we saw before. And despite the revenue and profit declines, Chanel continued to invest heavily, increasing their capital expenditure by 43% to $1.8 billion. Chanel's chief financial officer, Philippe Blondeau, explained that the change in approach to price increases isn't just about lowering prices, but about stabilizing them. He cited two main factors: inflation and currency shift. Because Chanel's prices are set globally, currencies and inflation differ country to country. That means they had to adjust in the past. Luxury sales have slowed down, and it seems that even Chanel isn't immune to changing consumer behavior. So Chanel isn't slashing prices, but it seems that the days of extreme annual hikes might be over for now.
Customers didn't suddenly wake up. We've been talking. But now that sales are softening and costs are climbing, now they're listening. And brands that have been overcharging and under-delivering, they're the first to feel it.
And in an industry where luxury brands seem to be immune or non-receptive to consumer feedback at all, it's actually quite a relief to hear that Chanel seem to be maybe listening to some of the feedback that they have been receiving. If they are listening, I'd argue that they're probably one of very few luxury brands who seem to have reached that level of maturity. There has been ongoing conversations for years at this point about the ridiculousness and the over-the-top approach that Chanel seems to take to price increases.
For those of you who don't know, Chanel just increased their prices again. And basically now their classic handbag doubled the price in less than 3 years, which is absolutely insane.
I think for the most part, luxury consumers are pretty familiar with price increases. Chanel are not the only brand that partake in price increases. And so price increasing that seems to move in line with inflation are usually received pretty well. There may be one or two rumblings about it being an inconvenience, but I think the general consensus is that pricing that rises in line with inflation is fair enough. However, Chanel have built a reputation of finding a reason to inflate their prices. And this comes during a time where the quality of their products are being put to question often. There seems to be an alleged reduction in the use of skilled craftsmen. There have been allegations of them relying more and more on machine manufacturing, in particular their bags en masse, and just doing the finishing by hand, using less expensive hardware.
I think the companies that are going to take away their market shares are Loewe, Dior, Celine. Those three will take the Chanel clients. Girlies that want the it bag, but don't want to spend $10,000 on a machine-made item.
It seems that Chanel may indeed have part of their ear to the ground and are hearing some of the rumblings from their consumers. Behind the scenes, Chanel does seem to be pivoting. Their focus is now on brand experience, store exclusivity, and ready-to-wear fashion, which are areas that actually grew in 2024, so is probably a smart approach. Like most luxury brands, Chanel doesn't want to be everywhere, and with the rise of pre-loved luxury and the improved accessibility that most people have to luxury, Chanel and brands like them have found themselves trying to find a balance, which I think has informed their choice to lean more into exclusivity and focus more on limiting access to high demand pieces. So instead of relying on price hikes, Chanel is doubling down on scarcity and elite service. And in all honesty, I think it is a very smart move. Chanel's revenue drop of 4.3% was their first decline since 2024. Although this drop is part of a larger trend, post-pandemic luxury shoppers are being more selective. Fast fashion is falling out of favour, but so is mindless luxury spending. It seems that Chanel, like a few others, are realising that they need to offer value beyond a logo. Whether that's heritage, craftsmanship or personal experience, just being expensive isn't enough anymore. So it seems what's next for Chanel is a continued focus on exclusive boutiques, more investment in ready-to-wear and jewellery, likely more stable prices adjusting slowly with inflation, and possibly more digital and AR experiences as luxury tries to modernise. It seems that rather than pricing themselves out of relevance, they're recalibrating. Although they know their brand has timeless appeal, they seem to also be aware that the market is shifting fast. And while a 3% increase isn't a price drop, it's a clear sign that they're listening more and adapting. I think that this changing strategy has received quite a lot of attention because it seems to be so unlike the approach that most luxury brands take. The only other brand that I can think of that seem to be more in tune with consumer feedback that they are receiving is Burberry. Their more recent decision to lean more into their brand tropes, from what I can see, really endeared consumers to them. I've seen loads of people talking on social media about how they really like the shifting approach that Burberry is attempting to make.
I mean, look, we're only seeing like such a small snippet of what new Burberry is going to give us, but I do really love how much they've leaned into its British, very London. It's raining, she's in an umbrella in her classic Burberry trench.
Of course, I think Burberry need a bit more time for us to see whether it's going to be effective in the long term, but there's something more human and more relatable about a brand saying, actually, you know, we've been going down this route and we've decided to shift slightly because we hear you. And I think it's an approach that is more effective in 2025, and unlike the more historical approach of staying silent or issuing very limited statements. I think in times gone by, and for most luxury brands even now, controversies are often managed privately or ignored unless they cause major financial or legal threats. A lot of these brands seem to rely on tight control of their image and message, using PR agencies and luxury media rather than public engagement. But social media has really worked to amplify consumer feedback. And throughout the 2010s, some luxury brands seem to enter a transition phase where the rise of social media has forced brands to address controversies more quickly. We saw that demonstrated with the Balenciaga scandal. Public statements and apologies also became more common during this time, although they were very often vague or defensive, and some brands began collaborating with activists or celebrities to repair their image or to rebuild trust. But in modern times, we're seeing an expectation from brands, including luxury ones, to have high public engagement, especially when it relates to controversies. Consumers expect prompt public apologies, often made via social media, with detailed information about what they plan to do to fix any of the issues that have been identified.
Together with his team, Charbit claims he's going on a listening tour to engage with advocacy groups who aim to protect children. Equally vague, he also alluded to a donation that will be made, saying, "We have set aside a significant fund for grants to organizations so that we can help make a difference in protecting children.
And where necessary, pull in products before backlash escalates. However, meeting this expectation still seems to be an area that most luxury brands are working towards. We saw Van Cleef more recently, in my opinion, fail at effectively manage a social media controversy. I do have a couple of dedicated videos on this scandal if you wanted to learn all of the details, but essentially the consumer in this case was sent a book and some flowers for her inconvenience after experiencing some frustration having her concerns addressed.
Van Cleef sent her a book as an apology gift. It is the most passive aggressive apology gift I've ever seen in my life.
And I actually did see a TikTok about this not being unusual for Van Cleef, that Van Cleef do regularly store books and other brand related artifacts in their stores and occasionally send these to customers to say thank you and, or in this case, apologize. However, I just think that these historical approaches to engaging with customers are no longer effective in 2025. I think they need to put more effort into improving their transparency and building and maintaining their relationships with customers, which includes showing some signs that they are hearing what their customers want, which I think Chanel have done on this occasion. So let me know what you think of Chanel's strategy adjustment down in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next one.